Hi, how are you?
Hi, Richie. Nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm real good. Thanks.
Okay, we're gonna start if you want.
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, you're about to release the second album with Adrian, but I would like you to tell me first how did you decide to work with him? Because for us, maybe it was a surprise to you two got together before making the first album.
Yeah, it was definitely something that kind of evolved over a long period of time. We were friends for years, and really what happened was there was a jam session at his house many years ago, and it was at a party. They had a party at their house, and so um after that, a few days later, we decided to get together and try to do some writing. We had time and we lived close by. And so he came over to the house and we started throwing around some ideas. And before you knew it, we had a couple of songs written and we liked what we were doing. So from there, it led to us making an album. And yeah, happened very naturally.
Okay, and now you have the second album, Black Light, White Noise.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about the writing and the recording process for the album?
Sure. Well, it's very much it's sort of this thing where like what one guy doesn't think of, the other guy does. And what I mean by that is we'll get together and Adrian will play me a bunch of ideas. And usually these ideas are in his computer and typically they're incomplete. So there might be a cool riff or a cool verse or a chorus idea, or maybe even a rough sketch of a song. And then I'll listen to him and maybe he plays seven things and we pick three or four. And then I do the same. I go through my archives and say, well, I've got this thing I've been working on and he picks three or four things. And then from there we start working on them and start seeing who lives and who dies, so to speak, out of the ideas. And usually the ones that kind of come together without too much struggle end up being completed and they turn into finished songs. And then at some point we run into the situation where, all right, now we've got six or seven songs that exist that we've written together. But we, want to round out the album, and then we start thinking about, well, what's missing, and you start thinking in terms of, well, um, you know, you've got a couple of songs that are slow, a couple that are medium tempo. Well, maybe we need a few faster ones. Now, I rarely implement that sort of concept into my own writing. When I'm alone, I just write whatever I write, and then hopefully at some point I've got enough to put an album out. But with Adrian and I, we do have a little bit more of a method to the madness, which is what I just described.
How would you define the chemistry between you and Edwin? Uh, Personal and artistic.
Well, personally, we get along great. I mean, we are similar, I would say. I think you know, he's a bit more reserved than me. I tend to be a little bit more emotionally triggered and reactive. I'm not the kind of person that, will sit back and analyze and think. I kind of tend to be more reactive, which could be good, could be bad, who knows, but that's just the way I've always been. Um, and Adrian has a certain calm about him, which is great. Uh, and it's nice to be around. And in the creative process, we really have a really nice rapport. It's interesting how things always just kind of fall into place, like who sings what. We both like doing guitar solos, but we've never been at odds with, well, I want that solo, or I want that one, or this, that sort of thing. Everything always seems to kind of fall, like water, into place, So it's hard to analyze, it's hard to talk about because it's just this kind of fluid thing that just kind of happens. And so I'm very thankful for that.
Regarding what you mentioned, a duet between two guitar players is kind of hard to see because um, maybe it's hard to combine personalities and egos. How do you manage your own ego and Adrian's ego to get together in the same project?
Well, I don't think either one of us really are, ego forward. I don't think we're really those. I don't know. I think what it is this. I think both of us can say this, but I'll speak for myself. I feel like that I've been doing this for a very long time. I put my first record out. I was 18, and so I've had many years in the journey of making music and presenting my work. And so as a result of that, I feel very well represented. When I was younger, I might have had these sort of things where like I feel like, well, I have to show myself in a certain way, especially in the beginning, because a lot of people didn't know that I could sing. And so this constant like, you know, deliberately ignoring the guitar, writing songs with no guitar solo and focusing on, it's like, no, I'm not going to give you the guitar anymore. I'm going to give you songs with me singing until finally people can see the actual picture of what it is that I really do. And so that was pretty much cleared up for me many years ago. And so, when I get in a room, it's more about the overall composition that we're creating and less about my personal light that is, being exposed. I worry a lot less about that than I do about is the music representing uh, something that I want to share with people, if that makes any sense. So, and I think Adrian has a bit of that as well, where he feels like he's well represented for who he is and what he does. So when we're working and writing and creating, the thought of ego or that sort of thing or attention or accolades. That never really enters the equation. It doesn't really fit into the puzzle.
What can you tell me about live performances as Smith Kotzen? How do you sound on stage?
Well, we don't have a lot of experience in playing live or touring. When the first record came out, uh, after right around the time that that record was completed, the pandemic hit. So we released that record during the pandemic, and what that meant was we really were not able to do a lot of touring. We did finally find a way to do some shows in California, and then we went to England and did some shows, which were great, really a lot of fun, but it was quite limited and very complicated in order to make that happen. Now, this time around, we did an acoustic show last month or earlier in the month, and that was really cool because we were able to really break down, and really hear the music, and I loved that. So now when I look at it, I feel like we've got two avenues to go. We could go out the typical, hard rock way with uh, the loud amplifiers and all that stuff, or we could do something where it's a little more personal and do the acoustic thing. So we have both now. And so I think next year, the way the schedules look, will be a year that we can really exploit playing live in both formats.
Great. Well, you've been here in Argentina with the Winery Dogs and also as a solo artist. What do you remember about Argentina? Were you able to listen to some of our music?
Um, you know, I love playing there. I have to say that the audience is just incredible. It's that thing where, the band kicks in. I remember the Winery Dogs playing there, and we have a song called Elevate. And there's a lick that is really a guitar lick. It's not something that you would sing. And when we kicked into that, the whole place was singing the riff Da, 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 do, dum, da, 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 da. What the hell? It was crazy, but it was cool. It was crazy, crazy in a very cool way. And so, I always look forward to that because the reality is when you're on stage, you do feed off of the energy of the audience. That's a big part of it. And so, and maybe for some artists, they can, you know, play through an audience that doesn't have, that's non-reactive and still have a good show. But for me, it's always been difficult to do that. I always uh, depended on the reaction somewhat, or at least to feel some kind of engagement, you know. And so that's one of the great things about playing there and what I remember the most.
Okay. I was listening this morning to Nomad, your last solo album,
Hmm.
and in your solo albums you always have different kind of music. So, but everything seems to be like a unit. And I wonder if albums as a concept are still important for you because many artists, they just release singles and not albums anymore. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, to each his own, whatever works for you in that moment is what's right. And so, by way of example, I've done both. Um, Obviously, I'm more of an album-oriented artist. If you look at, if you Google me and look at my releases, you'll see that. But I went through a phase where I did singles. I've done singles. I've got, at least 5 or 6 songs that are out there that were not part of an album and were put out as singles. And some of them are songs that became pretty, important songs within my base that got, a lot of streams, relative to the streaming numbers that I do. And so they're not on an album, and so what? It doesn't really matter. So I don't really think that you have to do it one way or another, you know. I'll tell you when the Nomad album was put together, um, the songs Nihilist and Nomad were already written and recorded for many years. I was holding on to those songs and I didn't know when would be appropriate to release them. And so what had happened there is that I had a lot of tour dates booked and I wanted to put something out. And I just happened to write the song Cheap Shots. And I thought, well, this would be a better song to put out to promote my tour. And I was initially only going to put out a single, and it was going to be the Cheap Shots song. And then suddenly, after writing that, I started getting all these other ideas. And then I went back and said, well, wait a minute. I still have Nomad and Nihilist written. Now I've got Cheap Shots. Now I just wrote this song called Insomnia. And then I started, all of a sudden I'm in this writing mode. I'm like, whoa, I've just, written an album over the last couple of months. And so then it turned into what initially was going to be a single, turned into an album. And so if you put those constraints on yourself, like, you know, that wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had the album. I would have stuck to the concept of the single. So I like the idea of leaving things open and because it can take you to some places that you normally wouldn't have went. And so to answer your question, I don't think there is a right or a wrong. If you write a song that you really think it's important to put it out now because the lyric is touching something that's happening now and you want to share that, then put the single out. Sometimes you wait too long and you miss the window. So um, I just think it's different for everybody. There's no real rule.
Okay. Just to be closing, you mentioned that you released your first album when you were just 18. You get a record deal, but now things in the music business are really different. How do you see the music industry nowadays, taking into account the digital platforms, the
Yeah.
social networks, and all those things that are involved in music?
Yeah, I don't really see it at all. I don't get into the conversations about how it is, how it was, what it's going to become, because the real truth of it, and I'm not trying to sound like a jerk, but I really don't care. I really don't, because I don't really feel like it affects me that much anymore. Because I started very, very young. And 1989 was when my first album was released, and now here we are in 2025. Somehow I'm still functioning as a recording artist, and I'm very thankful for that and happy about it. But I really don't have any valuable information in my head that I can share with anyone who's trying to do anything in the music business. I really don't feel like I have any really valuable information anymore because everything is so radically different now. And so what I do know is that thankfully I have this group of people that care about my music, and I can go out and I can play and I can continue to write. And I know that I'll always write because it's part of my functionality, I have ideas, I want to record them, and whether I release it or not, that might change, but I'll probably always write music because that's what I love to do the most, even more than performing, is writing and recording. But I don't know what's going on in the music business. I don't understand. A lot of the music that I hear sounds strange to me, then some of it, every now and then I hear something that I like, but I wouldn't know what to tell someone if they wanted to have a career in the music business. I have no idea because the stuff that got me engaged in music, it doesn't really seem to be there. You know what I'm saying? So it would be really difficult for me to advise someone, on what to do, other than if you're going to do what makes you happy, and do it for yourself. Do it for you and do what makes you happy, what you enjoy. And if you want to share it, go ahead, put it out there and see what happens. But I don't really feel like I'm in the music business, to the point where I can tell some young person, here's what you got to do. You know what I mean? I would feel very insincere doing that.
I see the